Right, we are back on the Audi R8 in today's video, guys, and I think it's going to be a bad one. I'll jump straight into it. I think I've got an issue with the clutch, and I think I might need to take the gearbox out. I've spent probably 2 hours bleeding the clutch every which way, vacuum, pressure, 2 people foot on the clutch, bleeding it that way, and I've tried everything. There is definitely no air in the system. The clutch pedal is fine, it feels great, it works fine. I've got a short clip of you can see through the window there in the bell housing, you can see the clutch mechanism operating, which I believe, I've been speaking to Ricky at RE Performance as well, and yeah, he doesn't think it's a slave or a hydraulic issue, which yeah, I agree with, and we think it might be a clutch that's the problem. So it means I might have to take the gearbox out. I mean, I did say I didn't want to take the engine out more than once, and technically I won't be. Didn't say anything about the gearbox though, did I? So yeah, I've been racking my brains and trying to think of a way where I can fix it without having to take anything back off, but I just don't think there is one. I think we've got to take the clutch out and have a look at it. I mean, that's the least of my worries, because a new clutch is about £2,000 as well for a new clutch. And that doesn't come with slave release bearing or anything like that. That's another sort of like 600 quid. I mean, yeah, I suppose the good news is I don't have to take the engine out, but I'm going to have to take, there's full coolant in the system, full oil. I'm going to have to take all that back out again, because to get the gearbox out, we might not have to mess around with the cooling system, but I'm definitely going to have to take the oil tank back off, which means I'm going to have to drain all the oil out of it. I'm going to have to take this cross member back off here, which was a pain to fit. I'm going to have to take a lot of things back off. So yeah. So we need to start things off by getting the car onto the ramp, and we need to get the Focus RS off the ramp. If you haven't seen this Focus RS before, please do click in the top right hand corner and go and watch the series up to date on the RS. So we'll get that out, get the R8 on the ramp, and we'll start taking the gearbox off, I guess. So I'll just give you a quick demo of the problem. Let's just turn the car on. So with my foot fully depressed on the clutch, I can't get it into gear. Look, no matter what I do, it won't go in. But if you see the car, it creeps forward. So it's trying to engage, but the fact is, me putting my foot on the clutch doesn't disengage the clutch enough to actually go in gear. That is my problem.
So let the frustrating disassemble begin, and we start off by getting it back on the ramp and basically retracing my steps and taking things off that I've only just put back on, starting with the air mass meters, followed by the oil tank, drive shafts, starter motor, etc, etc, etc. A surprising amount of gearbox oil fluid and power steering fluid came out of the car, considering I haven't actually added any more in since I took the engine apart, but the lines go all the way to the front of the car, so all that fluid trapped between the front and the back of the car gets then pumped around when I was running it, and there it comes back out.
So I think I'm in a position where it can come out, and I didn't have to remove quite as much as I thought. Well, I don't think I do anyway. So if you can see there, look, the top of the gearbox is just under that coolant pipe, and everything above it looks to be out the way. So fingers crossed, I can just get it out of that gap without having to remove anything else. So I've removed, yeah, drive shaft, all the coolant, gearbox oil lines. It was really annoying, so I had gearbox oil, power steering fluid, and engine oil, all the fluids coming out that I had to remove. But everything, gearbox mount removed as well. I've undone all the gearbox mounting bolts and the starter motor, and I had to remove the power steering pump as well. So we should be in a position. I've just jacked the engine up a little bit as well and loosened off the engine mounts. So I'm hoping now we can just wrap our strap around the gearbox, kind of lift it up like that and just pull it out. Sounds simple, but I'm sure there's going to be some problems.
And unfortunately, there were no problems. It actually came out really easily and a lot better than I thought it was going to. So yeah, enjoy this bit because it gets a lot worse.
Now, because I've never seen a clutch like this before, I don't want to replace it without knowing how it works, because I hate just replacing things without knowing why they failed and how it works, so we can definitely confirm that the clutch is at fault. So I have just set it up on my press here in a, essentially this press here is depressing the clutch. So I've got it on a couple of bricks here, look, so it's not affecting the clutch plate or anything. So effectively, all I'm doing at the minute by pumping this down is depressing the clutch like you would normally do with your foot. Now, okay, this is how I think it works. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. So I've got the clutch in a depressed state at the moment, and what it's doing is pushing down on the pressure plate, which in turn lifts up, by pushing it down, it actually lifts up this bit inside here, I don't know what it's called, so this part lifts up slightly, which then releases your friction plate here. And this lifting up also doubles back and lifts up this section here as well, which then frees off this friction plate. So in a depressed state as it is, the friction plates should be loose, which they are, look. They're both loose. However, they are very rough, very rough. And I also think I've gone more or beyond pressing these springs down than the factory clutch does. So if I just go up a little bit where I think it presses down to about here if I'm lucky. So if I can just try and, yeah, it's just, I can turn it, but it's very, very difficult. And that should be really easy to turn, because that should stop the gearbox spinning and mean I should be able to select a gear. But it's so rough and just seized that, yeah, no wonder I can't get it in gear, because that's proper in there. So I believe that's how it works. Please do let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. But in essence, yeah, I need a new clutch. Now, as I said earlier, this definitely could have been avoided, but as I said, never seen that type of clutch before, so I just lack of experience in that respect. But that's why we do these things, and that's why I like doing stuff that I've never done before, because I now know if I ever do an R8 gearbox again, that problem is never going to happen to me again, and that's just exactly what experience means. So there we go, we'll chalk it down to experience, lack of on that one, and I'm going to ring up and order a brand new clutch now, which I know is very, very expensive, but what do you do? I've got to do it, I've got no choice. The release bearing and slave is another £600, but I've checked those again. There's nothing wrong with them. I know it makes sense to replace it, but if it was 100 quid, but it's 600 quid, and there's nothing wrong with those, so I'm not going to. So I've just tried to order the clutch, I haven't been able to get through yet, so I think they're going to call me back in a minute. Hopefully they've got it in stock and I can get it for next day, but it doesn't matter for you anyway, because the next clip you're going to see, I'm going to have it in my hands, nice and shiny. So you join me a couple of days later now, and I have my new clutch here. But now I've got it up here, and looking at it, identical. There's nothing that looks obvious failure-wise, and operational-wise, it works exactly the same. So if you apply a little bit of pressure to the pressure plate here, it frees up the two friction plates, and you can spin them both, albeit very tough, with your hand. Now I thought that was my issue with this one, the fact that when I tried to spin it with my hands, it was really hard. If anything, it's even harder on the new one. So I think that eliminates the clutch as an issue, but I just now cannot work out what my issue is. So I took a little video of the slave cylinder actuating through the bell housing when I pushed my foot on the clutch. So you can see it moving in nearly an inch. Which is, I've tried it on this, it's more than enough to release the friction plates and allow it to go into gear. So that eliminates for me slave, master and hydraulic issue. And it also eliminates the clutch, because pushing down nearly an inch on the clutch, on the pressure plate, releases both friction plates so they can spin independently to the engine. Now, the other problem I thought I may have had is the fact that they skimmed the flywheel and didn't skim the outer casing, but after thinking about it, that would only make the clutch slip. It wouldn't make the opposite happen where it's difficult to get into gear. If anything, skimming it gives me more clearance, which means it should slip if anything. So basically that's where I'm at. I'm really confused as to what the fault is and why it won't go into gear. I can get to the point where the friction plates spin independently from the engine, which should slow them down enough to get it into gear, but it just will not go into gear. And we're not even talking like doesn't just go into gear. If I put my foot on the clutch fully and then start the car in gear, it will launch forward or launch backwards, which means it's fully engaged. So I don't know. Right, I've been sat pondering for a good 40 minutes, having a nice cup of coffee, thinking about what my next step is, because the reason I'm uncomfortable is because I can't find a fault with the old clutch. So I don't want to put it all back together with the new clutch and the clutch not be the problem, and I'm now 1,500 quid down on just a clutch for no reason, basically. The only thing that I can possibly think that may be an issue is the pressure plate. The only thing I can find is that the pressure plate is just a little bit weaker. Look, you can see it's just a little bit flatter than the new one. And I've got a couple of bent spring bits here, look. It's the only difference I can find. But then again, I saw how much the release bearing was actuating. It was just under an inch, and I did the exact same thing, just under an inch on that in the press, and it still was enough to release the plate. So I'm just clutching at straws and hoping that it's the pressure plate that is the issue here. Not 100% comfortable doing it, but I am just going to stick the new clutch in. I'm going to justify it in my head. Better to have a new clutch than an old clutch, even if it costs 1,500 quid, right? But I need to do something, and I don't know what else to do, so that's what I'm doing. I may time lapse some of the rebuild, but I'll just stick it on one big time lapse, and yeah, we'll fingers crossed we can put all this back together, and I just hope it goes into gear. Right, so I'm now back at a point where we can start this thing and try and put it into gear with it running. I'm not gonna lie, I've had a horrendous afternoon. I started time-lapsing putting this gearbox back in a good 5 hours ago, maybe even 6. What an arse this gearbox is. To try and get the gearbox located, I had this problem last time with the engine out, but it genuinely took me about an hour and a half to get this gearbox mated to the engine. It took us 3 people in the end. We're just wiggling it. It's just an absolute ball ache. But got there in the end, and I've then obviously put everything else back together. So I've just taken it off the ramp as well. So we're at a point now where I really hope this works, because I just don't want to do that again, if I'm honest. Right, this is it. Does it go into gear with the engine running? Please. Has it got a flat battery? Right, take 2, hopefully. Oh no. I know what's happened. Oh, this is a joke. I know exactly what's happened. Yeah, I forgot to plug in the crank sensor, which is way down there. Take 500. It worked! Right, I'm going to top up some coolant, I'm going to bolt the oil tank down, and we're going to go for a very small drive, because I don't know how much gearbox oil fluid is in it, if I'm honest. Come on.
I thought it'd be a wise idea to refit my driver's seat, because I don't want to be slipping off the pedal when trying to drive it for the first time and making myself look like a right tit.
And for the first time in this series, guys, I have managed to actually drive the R8, albeit just out the workshop, but I suppose a massive sense of achievement at the moment, because we have come a long way to get to this point, considering that the engine was, you know, obviously you've watched the videos, you know how bad the engine damage was, and to get to this point has been a massive amount of work. So I'm just going to do a couple of preliminary checks, top up the oil, top up the power steering fluid, check the gearbox oil, etc. while it's like this, and then once I've done that, I'll do that all off camera and we'll try and go for a little drive around the yard. Come on. Let's charge that battery. Right, I'm going to have loads of warning lights on, absolutely fine, half the back end's missing, but for the purpose of this video, we should be able to select some gears and go for a little drive round. Smooth clutch. Power steering probably needs a little bit more of a top up, but second gear. Good. Oh, this is weird. I have a driving R8 V8 manual. Right. It sounds so good without an exhaust on. This is officially my first drive, but because of the whole clutch problem, it feels like it's a minor issue now. Oh, this sounds epic. Oh, this sounds awesome. Who needs the exhaust? Woohoo! Oh, that sounds epic. So there we go, guys, managed to push it in and drive it out. The clutch sorted the problem, albeit an expensive one, but I'm glad it's now sorted, because yesterday was just an awful day in the workshop. Just nothing went right. It took me all day just to get that gearbox aligned, and it was just a pain in the arse. But then fast forward to today, and how good the car sounds, and how much more happy I am now that it drives. It's just night and day difference. And I guess I'm trying to put across the differences of the highs and lows of working on cars in general, not just your own car. But yeah, it's epic. So that is going to be it for today's video, guys. I'm sorry if it's literally not that much content, but for me it was like 4 days in the making and a lot of blood, sweat and tears. So next video, guys, the R8, although there's still quite a lot to do, there's loads to put back together, there's loads of things I've got to sort out, the wiring, etc, etc, but we'll save that for the next video, and hopefully maybe we can get a proper road test done. But for now, guys, she runs, she drives, and yeah, the R8 is looking sweet. So as always, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers, guys.